This round is good to begin. You can go ahead and begin.
What is all
right,
loss?
thank you.
All loss will be, what is it? Sorry. 12:30 Central. Oh, no, sorry, 12:50 Central Time.
Thank you. Your Honor, we have a few pretrial matters to attend to, if that's all right.
Yes, Ms. Pruitt.
Your Honor, seeing as this is our first time in your court, I'd first like to inquire, what are your preferences regarding sitting or standing during statements?
Well, ordinarily, I would prefer to see you all stand up during statements. However, given the current global health situation and the fact that we're all doing this over Zoom, I don't really want to see a whole bunch of fiddling with the cameras and making sure everything's set up correctly. So you will be permitted to remain seated for this round.
Yes, Your Honor. And can we assume that all exhibits shared to the screen are constructively not to be seen by the jury until they're admitted into evidence?
Yes, you can make that assumption.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we would invoke the rule constructively sequestering all witnesses save party reps. For the purposes of the rule, we do not have a party representative.
All right, counsel. The rule has been invoked, and any witnesses who are subject to the rule, meaning anyone who is not a party rep, anyone who is not testifying as an expert witness, so on and so forth, must leave the courtroom at this time.
Yes, Your Honor. We would also like to invoke Rule 603, constructively pre-swearing all witnesses.
Rule 603 has been invoked. All witnesses are hereby sworn.
And Your Honor, there should have been a bench packet provided to you that contains several documents that may be of use to you throughout the course of today's trial. The Midlands Rules of Evidence, case law, stipulations, that kind of thing. I'd like to direct your attention to case law Jacob v. Alexander.
Yes, Ms. Pruitt, what is the, for what purpose are you directing me to Jacob v. Alexander?
In a battery case, the touching that is necessary to constitute injury does not need to necessarily be physical contact with that individual. For example, a defendant who intentionally introduces a substance into the plaintiff's food or drink has committed battery even though the plaintiff voluntarily consumed that food or drink.
Does the defense have any objection to the court taking judicial notice of Jacob versus Alexander?
No, Your Honor.
Then we can consider Jacob. Yes, ma'am.
Apologies, didn't mean to interrupt.
Then for the purposes of this trial, the court takes judicial notice of Jacob versus Alexander. And when we instruct the jury, they will be told that battery, for the purposes of the battery, cause of action, touching need not necessarily include physical touching, but can also include less tangible forms of contact.
Yes, Your Honor. And with that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
All right, defense, do you all have any pretrial matters to bring up with the court?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense would only like to bring your attention to stipulation 1 that stipulates that all exhibits of evidence are pre-numbered and pre-labeled. And with that, the defense is ready to proceed.
Plaintiffs, do you have any objection to the stipulation? I assume not.
No, Your Honor.
All right, I think we are just about ready to get started. The court now calls the case of the estates of Genesis Petrillo versus Peony Estates and Harper Martini. My name is Judge Will Nelson. Scoring judges, if you could please look to the 2 buttons on the lower left of your screen and remember to keep your audio and video off unless you are told otherwise. You should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants. which means that the only people on the screen right now should be the advocates and me. Can the attorneys please make appearances?
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And
morning.
I'm just a moment, counsel. I'm going to instruct you all before you start speaking, asking questions of a witness, if you could please introduce yourself. I know that's a little repetitive since we can all see your names, but just for the purposes of the stream and to make sure we're clear about who's talking at which time. So I would ask that you all please introduce yourselves before you get started.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And the attorneys were making appearances.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Your Honor.
All right, counsel, is that everyone?
Oh, I'm sorry. Good morning, Your Honor. Yes, that's everyone for defense.
All right. We will now hear opening statements from each party. Everyone should make sure that they are in speaker view, and that button is in the top right hand of your screen. Counsel, please remember to mute your audio when the other attorneys are speaking. Plaintiffs, you may proceed with opening.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Shelby Johnson. May it please the court. Harper did what she said she would. Members of the jury, we're here to show how this hostile relationship between future in-laws was far from normal. Today, we'll discuss a young man named Genesis Petrillo, a man who didn't get to see his own bride walk down the aisle after drinking a bottle of wine at his rehearsal dinner on the night of June 7th, 2019. An ambitious man with his whole life ahead of him. He had real dreams and goals. He was engaged to a young woman named Casey Soto, and the two had elaborate plans to move to France and start their lives together. But you'll hear about Casey's mother, Harper Martini, the defendant in today's case. Martini's a single parent, and her only real family is Casey Soto. You'll come to find that the defendant was protective over her relationship with her daughter. And unfortunately for Genesis Petrillo, those feelings fostered a hostile relationship that would later cost him his life. You'll learn that the defendant's protective nature over her daughter was anything but normal. You'll find that from the moment the defendant met Genesis Petrillo, she viewed him as a serious threat to her relationship with her daughter. The defendant was uncompromising and for years did everything in her power to destroy the young couple's relationship. The defendant threatened Mr. Petrillo on numerous occasions, going to abnormally extreme lengths to force him out of her daughter's life. Harper Martini explicitly told Genesis Petrillo that she would take him out of the picture. And you'll see that Genesis, as well as everyone around him, feared those warnings. You'll find that the defendant followed through on those threats by poisoning a bottle of wine with chemical pesticides and gifting that bottle to Genesis Petrillo on the night of his rehearsal dinner as a peace offering. Genesis Petrillo's life was stolen from him, and it is nothing short of unlawful and unjustifiable. You'll find that the defendant's threats were very real. And we'll show you this through 3 witnesses. First, you'll hear from Casey Soto, the defendant's daughter. She'll talk about the toxic and malevolent nature of her mother's relationship with Genesis. And she'll discuss her mother's uncompromising drive to keep her from moving forward with her life. Next will be Dr. Jim Kwan, the chief emergency physician that treated Genesis the night he was poisoned. She'll talk about the tests that she ran on Petrillo the night of the rehearsal dinner. And she'll tell you that Petrillo's symptoms and his test results correlated with that of pesticide poisoning. Finally, you'll hear from Lonnie Paris, a local journalist. He'll tell you how his investigation into Peony Estates led him to witness the defendant's tense arguments with Mr. Petrillo. And he'll discuss how the defendant attempted to bribe Genesis Petrillo as a means of taking him out of the picture. Members of the jury, we bear the burden in today's case. We must prove by a preponderance of the evidence that there was an act by the defendant, that there was intent to cause harm, and there was harmful contact made to the plaintiff. But I want to bring attention to this idea of harmful contact. That contact necessary in proving that burden does not have to be physical. In showing that the defendant intentionally introduced Petrillo's wine with a harmful substance, we prove that burden. Today, we merely must demonstrate that the defendant had the intention of harming Genesis Petrillo, and she fulfilled that desire by poisoning his wine with chemical pesticides. And today, we'll prove these things by a preponderance of the evidence, because testimony will show that Harper did what she said she would. And at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Krish Katari, will come before you, and he'll ask you to find the defendant liable for battery. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Carson Dombrow again. May I proceed with my opening statement? Your Honor, may I proceed with my opening statement?
Yes, Ms. Dumbrow, you may proceed with your opening statement. I apologize, I was still muted.
That's okay. Mistakes, not murder. We, as imperfect individuals, make mistakes on a day-to-day basis, both small and large, irrelevant and life-changing. Sometimes we leave the overhead lights on in our car overnight. Sometimes we mishandle raw chicken, and sometimes we take the easy route to resolving an issue. Whether the consequences of these mistakes are small or large, these mistakes fail to show intentional outcomes. What is rarely found in an individual is a mistake-free life. Some of us have mistakes that haunt us for the rest of our lives. Making mistakes may cause one to lose a soulmate, a friend, a job, or even a precious item. These mistakes shape us into who we are here and now. Let me tell you about Harper Martini, the individual central to the case today. Harper was a world traveler, but a California native at heart. On one of the many vacations taken by Harper, Harper found her other half. The eager couple couldn't wait to start their lives together. And here's where we introduce Casey Soto. Casey was the apple of Harper's eye, whom Harper raised alone due to the unexpected passing of Harper's partner and Casey's father. Casey, an only child from a single-parent household, instantly bonded and relied on Harper. Harper was the only constant Casey ever knew. Harper, who adored Casey and supported all of Casey's endeavors, watched her grow up and take on new adventures. However, it is hard for any parent, let alone a single parent of one child, to watch their one constant find love and leave the nest. Harper, like any parent, had opinions and expectations of who Casey should be with in the long run. Casey and Genesis met and quickly hit it off. The happy couple soon got engaged, and Harper was not pleased. Genesis made a poor first impression on Harper by insulting Harper's prized possession, her winery, Peony Estates. The two had a rocky relationship from the start, and never failed to make that known through the cruel exchange of words they frequently shared. Alcohol played a vital role in today's case, and the relationship between Harper and Genesis as well. We are here today to discuss a winery owner, a heavy drinker, and a bottle of wine. Peony Estates, Harper's pride, joy, and winery, was purchased near a swamp. Was it the most ideal location for Midland's best-ranked winery? No. But it's what Harper, a young entrepreneur, could afford and make beautiful at the time of purchase. The defense is not intending to show the Harper Martini as a person who never makes mistakes. In fact, we're here to show you that Harper was an incredibly loving parent to Casey Soto, but not an incredible business owner. Harper made some incredible mistakes regarding the way she ran her business. When you enter this courtroom, the law permits that the only thing you can assume is Harper's innocence. Real-life mistakes will be discussed today, and these mistakes alone are not what make an individual liable of battery. Just because Harper Martini didn't like Genesis Petrillo does not mean that Harper was intentionally responsible for the death of Petrillo. In a court of law, we must focus on the facts. There are a lot of gray areas in today's case, and the plaintiff has the responsibility of making those gray areas black and white. But in order to prove battery, they must reveal intent from Harper, and that the harm caused by Harper was specifically intended to be ingested by the Cara wine bottle. We, the defense, do not have a burden to prove. However, we do have the facts. Harper was the owner of Peony Estates, the venue where the wedding was supposed to be held. Harper was also the mother of the bride, who presented the bottle of wine to her soon-to-be son-in-law. This wine, named Cara by Casey Soto, was often perceived as an olive branch to many of the guests at the wedding rehearsal. Harper adored Casey and would do anything for her daughter. Harper also drank the wine to test it, presented the bottle of wine to Genesis, and was even comfortable enough presenting that wine bottle with her only child sitting at the same table as Genesis Petrillo that night. If Harper Martini knew the wine was poisoned by pesticides, why would Harper even risk putting the wine anywhere near her daughter? Harper tasted the wine bottle and then bottled it, yet Harper Martini is here perfectly healthy today. Even after the trial today, many questions will be unanswered. What makes Harper the only suspect despite having numerous employees and caterers here today? Could someone else have been involved? Was it without a doubt the wine that was toxic? How could a person who made one simple mistake lose everything and be found liable for battery? Members of the jury, I bring you back to the assumption of innocence. The law is that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. I would like to prepare you for the possibility that you may feel pressure to make a decision early in today's case. This case has many twists and turns, so hear both sides out before you decide. Many of the witnesses in court today will be emotionally charged to the case, but I ask you to keep referring to the facts and the elements of the battery charge. While mistakes happen frequently in our lives that go unnoticed for many years, we must consider the timeliness of understanding a big mistake made today, so we do not falsely convict an individual of battery. We must rely on the facts of the case today and not the emotionally charged biases. There are too many other possibilities and theories that could have caused the death of Genesis Petrillo. And with this, we, the defense, ask you to find Harper Martini was not liable for battery against Genesis Petrillo.
Thank you, counsel. Now, before the plaintiff calls their first witness, I'm going to ask everyone to switch to gallery view. That button is in the upper right hand of your screen, and that will allow you to see the attorneys and witness at the same time. Has everyone switched to gallery view? Yes?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Plaintiff, you may call your first witness.
Plaintiff calls Casey Soto to the stand. And for the record, my name is Addison Pruitt. May we proceed?
Yes, counsel, you may proceed.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Casey Soto.
What is your relationship with Genesis Petrillo?
Genesis Petrillo is the love of my life. We were actually supposed to get married, but he passed away in July of last year.
We're going to talk about that a little later, Miss Soto, but first, how did the two of you meet?
We met in 2012 at the Rosie and Pedro Winery. I was invited to this party by a friend of ours, and I left to get some fresh air. I got turned around outside, and when I really thought I was lost, he was just there. He was always there. We really had something special, but my mom never really thought so.
Why do you say that?
Well, I wanted my mom to love Genesis as much as I did, as, as much as I still do, but she never approved of us. And I mean, she had good intentions, but once again, took things way too far.
Can you describe your relationship with the defendant?
My mom always said that I was all she had left. I mean, she practically forced herself into every aspect of my life and just assumed I would be taking over Peony Estates, regardless of what I actually wanted to do. So you can imagine what happened when she finally met someone I was serious about.
Well, how did that first interaction go?
It was awful from the moment they met. It was in 2015. My mom gave Genesis this bottle of wine at dinner, and Genesis, ever the comedian, made a joke asking if there was anything classier. He had no idea that the bottle came from my mom's winery, and it's been nothing but difficult since then, even more so when we got engaged in 2018.
How did the defendant react to the news that you were engaged?
My mom freaked, but I told her that Genesis and I would take care of everything. We actually booked our favorite venue, the winery we met at. Genesis and I were really excited to plan it all out, but our plans were no match for my mom.
What do you mean your plans were no match for your mom?
Well, right off the bat, things went wrong. My mom heard about our plans and had us change the venue. She said she'd not only be disappointed in me, but angry if I chose to have my wedding at the venue that I wanted. We eventually had the venue changed, but we weren't thrilled about it.
Well, how did the wedding planning go with the defendant involved?
My mom took over everything, the colors, the flowers, the catering, you name it. I mean, she went behind our backs on catering and even hired this wedding planner. The planning of what was supposed to be the greatest day of our lives just ended up being one fight after the other.
Well, what was the arguing about?
Well, my mom was the most hands-on mother of the bride I've ever seen. And while I was used to her butting into my life, Genesis wasn't. He actually called my mom to try and sort things out, but there was just so much yelling and screaming. I had to leave.
Did things ever smooth over?
Not really. Genesis kept trying to fight for the wedding that we wanted, but I just told him try not to anger my mom too much. I mean, we just had to make it through the wedding.
What was going to happen after the wedding?
Genesis had a job offer in France. We both really loved traveling and seeing new places, so we naturally jumped at the opportunity. All we had to do was just get through the wedding, and then we could be free of my mom and live our lives on our own terms.
Did anyone else know about the job offer?
Yeah, Genesis told my mom.
What was the defendant's reaction to the news that you were leaving?
I have never seen her that angry in my life. She just kept going on about how someone had to take over the family business and I couldn't just abandon her for Genesis. My mom was so mad. She told Genesis that she didn't care if he went off to France.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
To which statement?
I believe Casey said my mom told Genesis something.
Yes, Your Honor. Under Midland's Rules of Evidence 801 D2D or D2A, I apologize. This is a statement made by a party representative and is not hearsay.
I'm going to overrule the objection. You may continue, counsel.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm going to go ahead and re-ask that question. How did the defendant react to the news that you were leaving?
She was so angry. I've never seen her that angry in my life. She just kept talking about how I had to stay in Midlands and I couldn't abandon her. She actually told Genesis that she didn't care if he went off to France, stayed with me, or ended up 6 feet under, that I was staying in Midlands.
How did you feel about that?
I mean, I was terrified. We both were. I mean, I'd never seen her that angry before, and I had no idea what she was capable of. But I guess things just really came to a head the night of the rehearsal dinner.
What happened at the rehearsal dinner?
I mean, things were tense from the start. Genesis actually showed up late, and my mom said that Genesis shouldn't have even bothered to show up, and Genesis made a weird comment about not being able to be paid to stay away. I didn't know what they meant by that, but I just knew that this is not what I had in mind when I thought of my wedding. I actually just considered canceling the whole thing.
Well, did you cancel it?
I talked to Genesis. I mean, both of us wanted nothing more than to get married, but we were also terrified. We were scared that my mom might try something during the wedding, but despite our concern, we decided to go ahead.
Were there any other conversations with the defendant that night?
Yeah, there was. I tried talking to her about France again. I tried to make sure she understood that it was my choice to go, that I wanted it as much as Genesis did. But she kept saying things like, Genesis is the one behind this, and you can't let Genesis break up our family. No matter what I said, I couldn't change her mind.
How did the rest of the night go?
My mom decided to give a toast, and it was just a cruel joke. She got up there and berated Genesis in front of everyone. The bad blood between them was so obvious. It's why her second toast was so strange.
Strange how?
Well, my mom got up around maybe 10 o'clock and toasted Genesis again, but it was a complete 180 from anything she had ever said to him before. She even made this really big deal of giving Genesis a fancy bottle of wine that no one else got, not even me, and I'm her own daughter.
I want to talk to you about what happened the day of your actual wedding. How did that morning begin for you?
My mom came in around 8 and said that no one knew where Genesis was. She started going on about how Genesis had obviously bailed and we should just cancel the whole thing. It didn't feel right. She was just so ready to call it all off, but I mean, I had to get her out of the room.
Did you talk to anyone else?
Yeah, I spoke to Angel Rodriguez. I noticed that they were in their clothes from the night before, and I asked why. And that's when I found out that Genesis was in a coma at the hospital.
Were you able to go to the hospital?
I actually don't remember how we got there. It was 5 minutes. We were 5 minutes too late. The man who was supposed to be there for the rest of my life was dead. I remember just collapsing to the floor and feeling like I couldn't breathe.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Ms. Soto. And I know this might be hard, but what was Genesis's cause of death?
They told me it was pesticide poisoning.
Is there any way that you can think of that Genesis could have been exposed to pesticides?
I've gone over that night so many times in my head. Why he died and not me. I remember the doctor said he had eaten the pesticide somehow, but that didn't make sense at the time because...
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
I
Mayor-
would ask clarification on what statement.
Yes, the statement of the doctor told me he must have eaten pesticide.
Yes, Your Honor, this actually falls under an exception to hearsay under Rule 8034, a statement made for medical diagnosis or treatment. The doctor was, at the time, diagnosing Genesis with pesticide poisoning.
Counsel, I'm going to sustain the objection. I'm familiar with the exception to the hearsay rule statements for purposes of medical treatment, but my understanding is that that exception applies to the patient making statements to the physician, not to statements by a physician regarding the cause of death of an individual. Counsel, you may continue.
Yes, Your Honor. Is there any way that you can think of, Ms. Soto, that Genesis could have been exposed to pesticides?
Your Honor, objection to speculation, or the question calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Ms. Soto, how did Genesis get exposed to pesticides?
I honestly, I don't know. I mean, I've thought about that night so many times, why he died and not me. I mean, we ate and drank everything the same that night. I mean, we shared everything except the bottle of wine that my mom gave him.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, counsel, you may proceed with your cross-examination of the witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Hi, Ms. Soto. My name is Iman Ahmed, and I'll be asking you a couple follow-up questions, if that's all right with you.
Okay.
So I kind of just wanted to follow up on the last statement you just made, that you and Genesis ate all of the same things. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. We ate and drank everything. We shared everything except the bottle of wine.
So the only thing you didn't eat with, or the only thing that you didn't share with Genesis was the bottle of wine?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I want to take a step back and ask you about your family business. And so you spent many summers helping with your family business, is that right?
Yes.
And you're familiar with the storage barn?
Yes, I am.
And are you aware that pesticide used at the estates are stored there?
Yeah, I am.
And whenever you were figuring out about the financial issues that Peony Estates was having, Harper mentioned that there was a massive leak in the storage barn.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Your Honor, Harper is the party defendant. Therefore, the statement, or me mentioning that there was a massive leak was made by Harper.
Your Honor, that exception only applies to us using the defendant's statements against her. The defense may not use 801D to get in their own party opponent statements.
I'm going to sustain the objection. The statement has to be made by a party opponent, not the party who wishes to offer that statement into evidence. Counsel, you may continue.
Yes, Your Honor. So Ms. Soto, you were aware that there was a massive leak in the barn, correct?
Yeah, I was.
And whenever you saw that things were being relocated from the bottling area, you were aware that all of that couldn't be afforded.
I'm sorry, my internet cut out. Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. And so whenever you saw that everything would have to be relocated to the bottling area, you were aware that was because the repairs could not be afforded.
I don't.
Objection vague.
Your Honor, I could rephrase the question, or.
Please do, counsel.
Okay. So, so whenever you saw, because there was a massive leak, everything had to be relocated to the bottling area. Is that right?
Yeah, they had to get everything out. I believe so.
And that was due to not being able to afford all of the repairs that were needed.
I believe so. Yes.
And so you're not aware if Peony Estates ever raised enough money to actually fix those repairs.
Objection,
No.
Your Honor, to relevance.
I'm going to overrule that objection. Counsel, you may continue.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Soto, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
So you're not aware if Peony Estates ever raised enough money to fix those repairs?
I'm not really involved in the financial part of my mom's winery, so I really couldn't tell you.
Right, but you've had exposure working for the family business over the summers, right?
I mean, my mom owns it, so obviously I've been around the winery a lot.
Okay, so we can go ahead and move on. So around 10 p.m. at the rehearsal, you were at the rehearsal, of course, right?
Yeah, I was. It was my wedding reception.
Okay, and so you witnessed Harper make a toast.
I did.
And
Yeah,
that toast was for Genesis, right?
Yeah, it was.
And that's where Harper presented Genesis with the bottle of Cara wine.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. It was so different from anything else I'd ever heard come out of that she said to Genesis before. It was really weird.
Right. And so you never mentioned, or you never heard that Harper stated that Genesis would drink the bottle alone.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Counsel, do you have a response?
Yeah. Which specifically are you objecting to for hearsay?
Specifically to Harper's statements.
Your Honor, I could rephrase the question if that's all right.
All right, counsel, please rephrase your question.
Okay, so whenever Harper presented Genesis with the wine, that bottle wasn't just for Harper. It wasn't, Martini didn't intend for that just to be for Harper. I mean, sorry, for Genesis. My apologies.
I believe that she actually said that it was just for Genesis. I mean, it was also Genesis was the only person to get that bottle of wine. Everyone else got Horizon. I mean, it was a special bottle just for him.
Right, but Genesis poured a couple of glasses of that wine, isn't that right?
Yeah, I saw him pour a couple glasses.
And so you're not fully aware if Genesis was the only person who drank that wine.
No, I couldn't tell you that.
And so you never mentioned, or you never heard Martini specifically saying, sorry, let me rephrase. Although Harper presented that wine specifically to Genesis, there was no restriction for anybody else drinking that wine. Isn't that correct?
I mean, I guess anyone could drink from the bottle if they wanted to, but like I said, it was specifically meant for Genesis. My mom made that pretty clear, I believe.
Okay, and I want to move on now to Harper's involvement with the wedding. And so earlier you were describing that Harper was very hands-on with the wedding and making sure that everything was picture perfect.
Yeah, she kind of just took over the entire wedding process. I mean, it was ridiculous. I'd never seen a parent that hands-on.
Right, and so it went from picking out the colors to the chairs to the cake, things like that.
Yeah, to even going behind our backs and doing things that we didn't necessarily agree with. But yeah, she was very hands-on.
Okay, and in reference to when you were growing up, you described Harper as being a great parent who was always well-intentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I think that she always had good intentions, but sometimes she just took things too far.
And as of now, you're the only family that Harper has left.
Yeah, I mean, after my dad died, it was just me and her. I was raised by a single mom.
And after Genesis passed away, you never stayed with Harper. You left the country, right?
Yeah, Genesis and I had wanted to go to France, and I wanted to go for him. You know, we couldn't go together, but I could go.
And you haven't seen Harper since the funeral.
No, I haven't. I don't honestly know what to believe. I mean, no one wants to think that their parent is going to kill the person that they love, but I don't really trust Harper at this point.
But you haven't spoken to Harper either.
No, I haven't.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Pruitt, do you have a redirect?
Nothing further from the plaintiff, Your Honor. I ask that this witness be dismissed.
The witness is excused. You may step down from the stand, Ms. Soto. Before we proceed with the next witness, I just want to instruct counsel for both sides. It is the court's preference that you all do not make sidebar comments before you ask questions. Don't say, I'd like to ask you about this. Just ask the question. And then the other instruction that I would give you all is to please refrain from referring to people by their first names. Please refer to them by their last names.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thanks, Your Honor.
All right, plaintiffs, you may call your next witness.
At this time, the defense would like to call, or the plaintiff would like to call Dr. Kwan to the stand. Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Dr. Jim Kwan.
And Dr. Kwan, what is your profession?
I am a medical doctor, live in my dream. I'm currently chief emergency physician at River Valley Hospital. Been treating patients for, a couple decades now. Mm-hmm.
And what educational background do you actually have to hold these positions?
Well, to be a doctor, you have to be a doctor. You have to have a medical degree, which I have. I got one from the University of North Carolina, and I have a bachelor's degree in biology from Georgia Tech. I did my residency at Emory, as well as a fellowship in medical toxicology at Emory. And yeah, not too bad for an Army grad. Proud of myself, thank you.
And have you ever been published in your field?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Yeah, I have. I've pardon me, I've been published a number of times, specifically related to chemical pesticides, toxicology, medicine. You know, I grew up all over the world, being the child of a 2-star Army general. So I've seen the ravages that third world and second world countries have with pesticides. So in writing these articles, I've sort of made it my mission.
Objection, Your Honor, to narrative.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, you may, counsel.
She was just detailing her past experiences with the medicine field, which is very important for establishing her credibility in the case.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may, counsel.
The witness may as well just talk about her medical background and her experience, but pursuant to the question was, what are you published in the field, going into talking about your Army experience, et cetera, is not really pertinent to this specific scenario.
All right, well, Dr. Kwan, I'm going to direct you to answer the question you've been asked and try not to go down a rabbit hole.
All right, so Dr. Kwan, have you ever been published in your field?
Yes, I've been published and I've written articles based on my personal experience with the harmful pesticides. Yes.
So Dr. Kwan, ultimately, why are you here today?
Well, I was the treating physician for Genesis Petrillo, so I'm here to discuss my diagnosis from that encounter in the emergency room.
What data did you use to reach your diagnosis?
Well, to begin with, I closely monitored the patient. I physically examined him. I had lab tests drawn, vital signs, talked to the patient. Direct dynamic encounters with patients is the way to get a real proper diagnosis.
Is there a specific method that you used when diagnosing Genesis Petrillo?
Sure. In all emergency cases, you have to really clearly watch the patient, take vital signs, lab tests, as I mentioned. But I also employed something called the APATS method. It's an acronym for acute poison and toxicity scan. It's a step-by-step analytic approach to if somebody's suffering from toxicology problems, and if so, what toxin might be at work.
Was this method sufficient to reach your diagnostic conclusion?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've used this method in the ER countless times. Mm-hmm.
Did you reliably apply this method to this case?
I did, just as I do every single day. Totally committed to my patients.
Moving on, what did you observe when Genesis Petrillo first arrived at your emergency room in June of 2019?
Well, the patient presented with nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, slurred speech. The person that accompanied him, the patient, said that they'd been at a party, so I knew there was a lot of drinking involved. There was slow breathing, things that were at that point consistent with alcohol poisoning.
So from there, how did your treatment of Genesis Petrillo progress?
Well, you know, as time clicked off the clock, the patient had reported chest pain. From there, I noted that there was excessive tearing from the eyes and contracted pupils as opposed to dilated pupils, which is typical in an alcohol poisoning case. There was also wheezing, incontinence, and muscle twitching. As these symptoms multiplied, it was clear that alcohol poisoning was not the right diagnosis.
What else led you to suspect that it wasn't alcohol poisoning?
Well, you know, the blood alcohol concentration was 0.16%, which is way too low to be consistent with an alcohol poisoning. Second, there were just too many symptoms that didn't align with alcohol poisoning. And third, the order in which these new symptoms were presenting themselves were typical for pesticide poison progression.
So ultimately, Dr. Kwan, in your expert medical opinion, what was the cause of Genesis Petrillo's medical condition?
Well, you know, specifically, the cause was pesticide poisoning. More specifically, the cause was organophosphate, and that's a really common agricultural pesticide, especially.
Did you conduct any tests at all to confirm that Genesis Petrillo was indeed suffering from pesticide poisoning?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I did lab results that tested the patient's blood as well as the patient's stomach contents because the patient was, you know, vomiting repeatedly.
Would you recognize those tests if I showed them to you in court today?
I sure would. Mm-hmm.
Your Honor, in accordance with stipulation 3, we have Exhibit 5 as being pre-admitted. And Ms. Pruitt, can you display Exhibit 5 at this time? So, Dr. Kwan, looking at this test, can you walk us through these test results?
Well, there's a lot of involvement with other testing, but the pertinent thing here today is if you look midway through, it shows that a really dangerously low level of acetylcholinesterase enzyme. Now, an enzyme is a substance that's present in our bodies that kind of kicks off a chemical reaction, if you will, to make our bodies work properly, right? Like muscle and nervous system functions. So when that level goes too low, it impedes those functions. In this case, the acetylcholinesterase enzyme was low, and there's a very scientifically known organophosphate substance that is known to reduce the acetylcholinesterase enzyme.
Thank you, co-counselor. We can take that down now. Your Honor, once again, in accordance with stipulation 3, we have Exhibit 6 as being pre-admitted. And Ms. Pruitt, can you display that at this time? So, Dr. Kwan, what are we looking at here?
Well, this is really, really remarkable because it shows that there was isofenfos in the patient's blood as well as in the patient's stomach. So what isofenfos is basically the poisonous chemical compound found in organophosphate.
Is there anything else remarkable about this exhibit, Dr. Kwan?
Oh, absolutely. The other findings, more toward the bottom, it indicates that the isofenfos, or the poison found in the stomach, was mixed with the wine. But what really stands out here, and make note, is that the non-wine food remnants inside the patient's stomach were found to have no presence of the poison. I found that to be very telling.
So what does this mean?
Well, it means that the wine was the most likely, in my opinion, the only substance found in the patient's stomach that could have caused the poisoning.
Thank you, Ms. Pruitt. We can take this exhibit down now. So, Dr. Kwan, could there have been any other way in which Genesis Petrillo could have come into contact with the pesticide?
Well, yeah, there's always a way, inhalation or skin contact, but in this case, I found no decipherable evidence that there was any damage to the skin or tissues on this patient.
If someone were to take a sip of wine contaminated with the pesticides and then spit it right out, would there be any detectable negative effects?
No, there'd have to be really prolonged contact with the chemical and the body tissue for there to be any decipherable negative effects.
Finally, Dr. Kwan, what is your overall ultimate conclusion as to the cause of death of Genesis Petrillo?
Well, the distinctive set of symptoms that we had in this case, coupled with the lab results, the symptoms, clearly pointed to pesticide poisoning. In the medical field, we refer to a death such as this as a chain death, right? So death was linked to the organophosphate poisoning, and that was linked to respiratory failure, which was again linked to Genesis Petrillo drinking a glass of presumably poisoned wine.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, counsel, you may begin your cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Kwan, going into your experience, you are on the board of directors of Doctors for Organic Solutions. Is that right?
I certainly am very proud of that work.
And it is your belief that chemical pesticides is a scourge to the environment, right?
Absolutely. I've seen it hundreds of times all over the world. It's horrifying.
And Dr. Kwan, you can agree with me that your organization is actively fighting for the ban of chemical pesticides.
Indeed we are, yes.
In fact, you are hoping that the results of this case is used to convince lawmakers to ban the outright use of chemical pesticides, right?
Well, this and hundreds of other cases that kill people. So yes.
Now, you interacted with Genesis Petrillo at the hospital first, is that right?
Yes.
And they came in as a patient?
Yes.
Okay, let's go over some of those symptoms then. Petrillo had trouble responding to you, is that right?
Yes, the patient did. Mhm.
And you mentioned Petrillo smelled of alcohol.
Yes,
And Petrillo even stated that they had been drinking an exorbitant amount of alcohol, right?
yes. And I would add that the alcohol exacerbates effects of organophosphate chemically.
You also noted that they had nausea, right?
Yes,
Vomiting,
yes,
slurred speech.
yep, absolutely.
And all of these symptoms are indicative of alcohol poisoning, right?
Well, at the onset, yes, but additional symptoms progressed over the course of treatment. But you're right on that, sure. Mhm.
Yeah, and that's right. You eventually did not find Petrillo to be suffering from alcohol poisoning, right?
That's correct.
You noticed a very specific symptom, that being a bronchospasm. Do I have that right?
Yes, a bronchospasm is a spasm in the lungs when they are unable to work properly, and the bronchial tubes in the lungs constrict, right, which is a cause of organophosphate, which comes from organophosphate poisoning. They constrict, and so then the patient can't breathe. So yes. Mhm.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. Now, you believe that there is a different substance ingested as a result of noticing those bronchospasms, right?
Well, bronchospasms is something that is always linked to organophosphate. So yes.
Now, I just want to clarify a few points. Organophosphates cannot be directly tested for, right?
There are other indicators that you would connect them to, but yes, that is the standard, however.
That's right, Dr. Kwan. You need to test for acetylcholinesterase. Is that correct?
Yes, that is a telltale sign of organophosphate poisoning.
Meaning you have to ask for very specific tests to be ordered.
Well, Jonas, yeah, that's what we do in the emergency room. We have to think fast and work fast to try to save lives. And so we use our expertise. And hey, I'm an expert in medical toxicology. I've been doing this over 20 years. I know what I'm looking for and I know what I see.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kwan.
Yeah.
Now, you can agree with me that there are 3 specific ways that an individual can ingest or be poisoned by organophosphates. Is that right?
Sure. Inhalation, ingestion, or skin contact.
So let's talk about skin contact first. Skin contact alone is enough for, at minimum, severe poisoning symptoms. Is that right?
Can be. Again, it's all relative and it depends on the length of time that the poison is in contact with the body tissue.
Now, Dr. Kwan, did you mention anywhere in your report about the length of time related to a poisoning?
I don't recall. No, I don't think I did because you can't really tell unless you're there and watching it, right?
Dr. Kwan, did you provide any studies relating to the length of time someone needs to come in contact with organophosphates for them to be poisoned?
I've seen it in my work.
Dr. Kwan, back to my question, did you include any research in your report relating to how long someone would need to come into contact with organophosphate poison?
I don't remember doing that. I know that there's research out there, but I don't recall if I included it in my report.
No, Dr. Kwan, you can agree with me that contact with the skin is enough to cause burning at least. Is that right?
There's all kinds of other factors. Everybody's different. Everybody's skin, sensitivities are different. But yes, it can cause contact. But it would also leave evidence. And in this case, there was no.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan.
Oh, you're welcome. Sure.
Now, you can agree with me the second way is to breathe it in. Is that right?
Counsel, please let the witness finish answering her question before you move on to your next question.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you may.
Dr. Kwan, you can agree with me the second method is inhalation. Is that right?
Yes, indeed it is.
All right. And the third method was by eating or drinking, otherwise known as just consumption. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. And it's your opinion that Genesis ingested or consumed the pesticide, right?
Well, it's not just me. Yes, it is my opinion, but it was also shown by fact in the laboratory analysis.
Right. You tested the contents of Genesis's stomach.
Right. Plus the blood.
Now, are you certain that it was the wine specifically in Genesis's stomach that contained the poison?
It was the only thing found in Genesis Petrillo's stomach that included the organophosphate poison. Nothing else in the stomach included the organophosphate or the isophenol.
Now, Dr. Kwan, I want to make sure that we're clear on this issue. You tested the stomach contents of Genesis Petrillo, right?
Well, I sure want to be crystal clear too, and thanks for that. I appreciate it because scientific certainty is super important. In this case, yeah, there was isophenol found in the stomach and in the blood.
And there was more than just wine found in the stomach. There was also food. Is that right?
Right, right. Thanks for bringing that up because the food remnants in the stomach, we tested those too, and there was no detectable isophenol in the non-wine food particles. And that was in that thing that they showed a little while.
Dr. Kwan, is it my understanding that you went through each individual particle and tested each particle of food and wine for isophenol?
Well, I didn't personally, but the lab did. And they tested
now, if Petrillo,
chemicals, which is standard.
Now, if Petrillo had ingested another contaminated food or drink item, it would have dissolved in the stomach. Is that right?
Depending, some foods dissolve in the duodenum, which is the next stop. Once the food particles leave the stomach, they travel into what's called the duodenum. It's a little kind of a portal where the body decides what to do with the food next, and then it goes past the gallbladder and then into small intestine. So it could have been absorbed in the small intestine, it could have been absorbed in the duodenum, but essentially.
So, Dr. Kwan, if another item of food mixed in the stomach with the wine, it would have produced results that would not have been conclusive that it was the wine specifically.
I'm not sure I'm really following you in your reasoning, but what I can say is that there were no food particles that were tested that showed signs, right, that showed any evidence of the isophenol. But the isophenol was in the wine. So beyond that answer, I know I'm a crystal ball. I can't tell you beyond that.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. No further questions, Your Honor.
Sure.
All right, counsel, will there be a redirect of this witness?
None, Your Honor. We just ask that you excuse the witness. Thank you.
Dr. Kwan, you may step down and you are excused.
Thank you.
The plaintiff calls to the stand Lonnie Paris.
Excuse me, counsel. I'll tell you when it's time to call your next witness.
I'm so sorry.
But you may call your next witness, plaintiff.
The plaintiff calls to stand Lonnie Paris. I'd like to state for the record that my name is Shelby Johnson. Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Morning, everyone. My name is Lonnie J. Paris.
And where are you from, Mr. Paris?
I'm from the beautiful state of Washington, but now I live here in Midlands.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm a hot in demand investigative journalist, and right now I'm freelancing.
And why are you here today?
I was called to come in and talk about my investigation, and so that's what I'm here to do, talk about it.
So how did you start your investigation?
Well, an informant had called me about Peony Estates' excessive pesticide use, so I figured that I should go and check it out.
Your Honor, hearsay. Hearsay, Your Honor.
Counsel, do you have a response?
Does opposing counsel mind clarifying what exactly they're calling for hearsay?
Yes, of course. I believe Mr. Paris stated that an informant called him, which is an out of court statement.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Paris is simply using this to lay foundation, if I may make a burden of proof.
Well, counsel, laying a foundation is not an exception to hearsay. If you would like to rephrase your question, you should do so, but I'm going to sustain the objection.
Mr. Paris, how did you start your investigation?
I started with web searches, and I found out that Peony Estates is surrounded by swamplands and marshes. I figured that because of all the bugs, they might need to use a lot of pesticides. So I figured I'd go and start taking tours in July 20.
Your Honor, narrative. Narrative, sorry, Your Honor.
Counsel, do you have a response?
Mr. Paris is simply using this to lay foundation for how he started his investigation and what aspects of that research led him to go on tours of Peony Estates.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Paris was telling a story of his investigative research on Peony Estates.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think that was a proper question, and I think Mr. Paris answered the question correctly. You may continue.
So, Mr. Paris, what did you do on these tours?
I'd search around, make sure that, my informant was telling the truth, but I didn't find any excessive use of pesticides. But I did find out a little bit about the owner while I was investigating her office.
And what did you learn about the owner?
I learned that the owner's name is Harper Martini, I think, and she has one daughter named Casey Soto. She's owned Peony for a number of years, and I was actually able to see Genesis Petrillo propose to Casey later that day.
So, Mr. Paris, throughout your investigation of Peony, did you ever interact with the defendant?
I didn't have any personal interactions, but I was able to actually witness two distinct meetings she had in sometime in mid to early 2019.
So, what did you see at that first meeting?
The first meeting, I saw Harper and what looked to be like someone named Genesis Petrillo.
And what did you hear them say?
I couldn't hear what they said, and I can't read lips. All I saw was mouths moving. So I figured that I should just wait around for a hot minute, but I saw Harper hand over an envelope to Genesis, or what looked to be like her.
Did you see that second person take that envelope?
I did, and that seemed to be the end of the second meeting, but it wasn't the last time that I saw an envelope at a meeting.
Well, what do you mean it wasn't the last time you saw an envelope?
Well, the second time I went was in June 2019. It was during a wedding rehearsal. I heard some loud, vulgar screaming from while I was in the bottling area, so I went to check it out, and I found a crumpled up envelope on the ground.
And who did you hear screaming?
I could tell from the raspiness of the first voice that it was Harper, clear as day. I couldn't put my finger on the second voice until later when I heard the wedding toast. Then I could tell from how loud and squeaky the voice was that it was Genesis, clear as day.
Do you know what they were screaming about?
No, I did not, but it sounded really bad. It was very vulgar, very loud, but I figured I should go and check it out anyway.
So when you went towards the screams, what did you see?
Well, at the time, whoever it was, they had cleared out. They had clearly dipped out, but I found that envelope on the ground. I went and checked it out. It was all crumpled, so I pulled out what appeared to be a letter. But I soon heard footsteps, so I just snapped a picture and I went and hid.
Mr. Paris, was this the same envelope from the first argument you witnessed between the defendant and Genesis?
Ma'am, I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Mr. Paris, would you recognize your picture of the envelope if I were to show you it today in court?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Your Honor, permission for co-counsel to display Exhibit 24.
Any objection from the defendant?
No objections, Your Honor.
All right. Plaintiff's Exhibit 24 may be shown on the screen.
Mr. Paris, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, ma'am. That's an exact copy of the photo I took of the letter that I was talking about earlier.
And is it a fair and accurate representation of this picture?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
The plaintiff offers Exhibit 24 into evidence. Mr. Paris.
Any objection? Any objection from the defendant?
No, Your Honor.
Plaintiff's Exhibit 24 is admitted.
Mr. Paris, what did you learn from this note?
I was able to learn that Harper was offering 300 grand for Genesis to basically leave. Otherwise, Harper would take Genesis out the hard way. That doesn't sound good. After that, Harper actually came back for the note.
Why did she come back for the note?
No clue. All I heard her say was, "I forgot that I should get rid of this." And then she went and burned it in the furnace.
Your Honor, permission for co-counsel to take down this exhibit?
Permission granted, although it appears that your co-counsel has already taken it down.
Mr. Paris, what did you do after that?
Well, I decided to follow her, and she went through the bottling area, picked up this bottle of Carl wine, and then she left. But I thought this time it looked a little suspicious.
Why do you think that can look suspicious?
Well, there was this empty can with it without a label on it. I poured some liquid into a vial to get some analysis, and I learned it had high levels of this chemical called isophenthos in it.
What did you do after you collected the contents from that can?
I went back to the wedding rehearsal, and I wanted to talk to Genesis about the wine that he was getting from Harper, but I didn't get the chance to.
Did Genesis accept the wine?
Time.
It appeared.
Counsels, what's your objection? Time's up.
Your Honor, I didn't object. Yes, sir. It was time up.
All right, Ms. Johnson, you can finish your question, and Mr. Paris, you can answer that question, but then we're going to wrap up.
Mr. Paris, did Genesis accept that wine?
I mean, it certainly seemed to, but I figured after I was going to ask about it, it could wait till the next day. But unfortunately, I couldn't ask him because, well, the next day he was dead.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, counsel, you may proceed with your cross-examination of the witness.
Yes, Your Honor. And for the record, I would like to state that my name is Carson Dombra again. Mr. Paris, you would say that a good description of your job is to expose corporate America's dark secrets. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. If there's one thing that J, my middle initial, stands for, it's justice. And the people need to know justice. And that's my job.
Sorry. And in August of 2016, you received a tip regarding Peony Estates misusing pesticides. Is this right?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And receiving tips from businesses with competitors is common, correct?
Yeah, they usually want to expose their rivals for dirty practices. And I usually don't take that seriously. So I decided that I was just going to take it with a grain of salt. And I didn't really investigate it until much later when BNN or Blitz News Network, my former employer, decided to let me go.
And upon that investigation, you realized that Peony Estates was very close to a swamp. Is this correct?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
So you weren't surprised that pesticide usage was necessary. Is this right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, you weren't surprised that pesticide usage was necessary. Is this right?
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, well, ordinarily, I would ask the plaintiff if they have a redirect, but since you all are out of time, the court will not give you that opportunity. And I also believe that plaintiff has no more witnesses. Is that correct?
No, Your Honor. We rest our case in chief.
All right. The court is going to take. Yes.
I'm just going to request a 5 to 10 minute recess.
Counsel, I was just about to tell you that the court will take a we'll take a 10-minute break. Please remember that this video is being publicly broadcast via YouTube live stream. Don't do anything you don't want the world to see. I will see you all again in about 10 minutes. The court stands in recess. All right, everyone. Before we proceed with the defendant's case in chief, I would just ask that everyone identify yourselves, and so that way we can make sure everyone is back in place before we get started.
Plaintiff is present and ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Defense is also present, ready to proceed, Your Honor.
All right, do we have both of our scoring judges back?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, I'm here as well.
All right. And with that, we will proceed with the defendant's case in chief. Defendants, you may call your first witness.
Your Honor, defense would like to call Danny Francasio to the stand. Good. And for the record, I would like to state my name is Carson Number again. Okay. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Danny Francasio.
What do you do for a living?
I own the premier wine establishment in Rapid River Valley. You should come and pay me a visit. Me and my two dogs, Rosie and Pedro, who my establishment is named after.
And Mr. Francasio, where did you go to school?
I went to Boston College for my degree in biology, where I studied the science of fruit-based fermentation, and I got my MBA from Duke.
Are you aware of Harper Martini?
Yes, I took a risky business decision and took a chance on an inexperienced winemaker by hiring them.
What was your experience working with him?
Like I said, it was a risky business decision. They were a diamond in the rough, and it was definitely a project working with them. However, I was able to train them, and they did move up in my ranks.
What did she do for you?
First, I had them as a cellar hand. They dealt with transfer of wine and ensuring there were no pests in my cellar. In case that there were pests, we had to use pesticides very carefully.
Why did she need to be careful with the pesticides?
Not only is it the law, common sense, and good business, it ensures that it doesn't contaminate the wine and poison those who consume it.
So how did Harper go about this process?
Under my supervision, Harper performed this treatment about 6 times mistake-free. The process went, they would notify me, seal off the barrels, then we'd use the pesticides carefully and store them far away in the garage afterwards. But when Harper left my winery, I guess they left their precautions.
So you said that Harper moved up in the ranks at Rosie and Pedro's. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, in 2014, I promoted them to manager when I had openings, and they exceeded my expectations for almost a year.
Did she stay at Rosie and Pedro's?
Disappointingly, in 2015, she betrayed me and quit.
So you said that Harper betrayed you. What did you mean by that?
After everything I had done for her, she took the knowledge I gave her and started her own winery in my valley.
After she started her own winery, did you keep in contact with her?
I never initiated a contact, but in 2016, she began emailing me for my help with their winery.
Would you recognize a copy of these emails if they were shown to you in court today?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to constructively approach the opposing counsel and the witness with what has been previously marked as Exhibit 14 and 17.
Go ahead, counsel.
Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of your emails?
Yes.
Is this your email address?
Yes.
Is this the email address of Harper Martini?
Yes.
The defense offers Exhibit 14 and 17 into evidence.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
The emails are being used for subsequent action, not the truth of the matter asserted.
Your Honor, I ask that the foundation be laid before we start talking about any exhibit that contains a statement by Harper Martini.
Sorry.
Okay. Counsel, I'm going to ask that you lay a foundation establishing Mr. Francasio's knowledge of where these emails originated. And also I would ask that you establish that this was indeed information acted on and that these are not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
Okay. May I continue with my line of questioning? I feel like I already established this foundation because these emails were sent to Mr. Francasio.
Counsel, I'm not sure that Mr. Francasio has testified that he knows based on his personal knowledge, that these emails actually originated from Ms. Martini, but also I'm not sure what subsequent action Mr. Francasio made in response to these emails, but I will give you an opportunity to question Mr. Francasio on those before we admit this as an exhibit.
Yes, Your Honor. One moment, please. Okay. Mr. Francasio, how do you know these emails?
These are emails that I received from Harper Martini.
Okay. And these emails were sent directly to your email?
Yes, and there's my responses in them as well.
Okay. And these originated from Harper Martini's email address, correct?
Yep, that's her email right there.
Okay. May we start with Exhibit 14, Your Honor?
Any objection from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor. Again, I object to hearsay. I believe opposing counsel just asked the same 3 questions, laying the same foundation for this exhibit that was insufficient the first time and is still insufficient now.
Your Honor, I believe I laid the foundation and stated that these emails originated from Harper Martini and were sent to directly Danny Francasio.
Your Honor, my issue
I did hear that, counsel.
is with the foundation regarding using the exception for subsequent action.
I agree with you that counsel has not laid the foundation that Mr. Francasio acted in response to these emails. I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure if counsel really is offering these for the truth of the matter asserted or if this is information acted on. I also would direct counsel to let the court finish speaking before you start speaking. I know that the Zoom call makes that difficult to do sometimes, but I would just direct the parties to keep that in mind.
Mr. Francasio, how did you respond to the emails?
So when I received these emails, at first I was kind of hesitant to respond, but then I was like, there's a possible safety for the public that's at risk, so I'm going to respond.
And how did you act when you received?
So when I received the emails, I decided to reply back to Harper.
What was the issue that Harper was having with the storage of pesticides?
Harper was having issues with her employees storing them. Usually when that happens with my employees, just a quick memo and some extra training helps to fix the problem.
Refers to facts not in evidence. At this time, they're attempting to read off of this exhibit that has still not been entered into evidence. And I believe they've gone outside of the scope of asking foundation questions at this time.
I agree, counsel. This exhibit has not been admitted into evidence. The court is not convinced that it's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted at this time. So I'm going to direct counsel to please move to a different line of questioning.
Okay, we can remove the exhibit. Were you aware of Harper's child?
Yes, she was a dear friend of mine. Her fiance, Genesis, visited my establishment quite often.
Did you know about the wedding?
Yes, the original plan was actually to have it hosted at Rosie and Pedro's.
You said the original plan. Did the plans change?
Yes, the plans changed in 2018 when I received an invitation in the mail to their wedding.
Did you plan on attending the wedding?
No, I respectfully declined. I never want to jeopardize Casey's special day.
So what is the most recent event you're familiar with regarding the wedding of Casey and Genesis?
I'm aware that Genesis passed away the morning of the wedding. It was absolutely devastating to hear this. I felt so bad for Casey and Harper. Rosie and Pedro's hasn't been the same since my two best customers have been absent.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, do the plaintiffs have a cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Good morning, Mr. Francasio. Harper Martini used to be one of your employees, correct?
Yes.
Your relationship with Harper deteriorated after she left Rosie and Pedro.
Yeah, I taught her everything she knows, and she goes and betrays me and starts her own winery.
You are still close with Harper's child, Casey, after the fact, is that right?
Casey did nothing wrong with me. I will not blame her for the faults of her mother. I loved Casey so much.
Casey and Genesis were like family to you, right?
Exactly. That's why I was so excited when they wanted to have their wedding at Rosie and Pedro's.
Now, you witnessed Genesis and Harper butting heads leading up to the wedding.
Harper was sending me emails and voicemails about issues, yes.
You heard Harper tell Genesis to save us all the trouble and walk away.
Yeah, everyone makes loose threats. In-laws always fight.
You heard her yell at Genesis.
Okay, yes.
You heard her say, if you ever try and take Casey from me, it'll be the last thing you ever do. Is that right?
Could you rephrase the question?
You heard
Or repeat
Harper
the question, sorry.
say, if you ever try to take Casey from me, it'll be the last thing you ever do. Did I get that right?
Yes, it's correct.
No, that's not the only time you've heard Harper talking about Genesis, is it, Mr. Francasio?
No, she would talk to me about issues. It seemed like she was just venting normal in-law issues.
She actually left you a series of voicemails between 2018 and 2019. Is that right?
Yes, again, her venting to me.
You'd recognize those voicemails if I showed them to you in court today?
Yes.
Your Honor, a permission for opposing counsel to display Exhibit 18D on the screen.
Counsel, are you approaching the bench with this exhibit, or has it been pre-admitted?
I'm approaching the bench with it.
All right, please display this exhibit.
Now, Mr. Francasio, this is that voicemail.
Yes.
It appears to be a true and accurate transcript of that voicemail.
Yes.
No changes or deletions appear to have been made.
None that I can tell of, no.
At this time, Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 18D into evidence.
Is there any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit
No.
18D is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Francasio, in this voicemail, Harper said to you, I hate saying the name Genesis.
One moment, let me get my reading glasses out. Yes.
She said, Genesis is good for nothing.
Yes.
She said, I swear only one of us will survive.
Objection, Your Honor, needlessly cumulative.
I'm going to overrule that objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Harper Martini said, I swear only one of us will survive this wedding. Is that right?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
All right, Ms. Dumbrauer, do you have a redirect for this witness?
No, Your Honor, I just asked that at this time my witness can step down from the stand.
Mr. Francasio, you are excused, and you may stick around, you may leave, whatever your preference is.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, defendants, please call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Austin Lewis to the stand. For the record, my name is Iman Ahmed. Could you please go ahead and introduce yourself to the court?
Good morning to all. My name is Austin Lewis.
And Austin, what do you do for a living?
I make wine for a living. Most recently, I'm in charge of overseeing the growth, harvesting, fermentation, aging, and the bottling at Peony Estates.
And how long have you been a winemaker?
Well, winemaking is in my blood. Back in the day, my mother was in charge of winemaking at what used to be called the Cumberland Farm Winery, but it's Rosie and Pedro now. and I took my job as a winemaker there in 2012. I've been making wine ever since.
And so who have you worked with when making wine?
Well, originally I worked at Rosie and Pedro's with Danny Francasio, but I took on a venture with Harper when she opened Peony Estates.
How did you first meet Harper Martini?
Well, actually, Harper and I met shortly after I started my winemaking job at Rosie and Pedro. It was there that we really hit it off and developed a super quick friendship.
Could you describe your relationship with Miss Martini?
Oh, of course. Harper and I have been close friends for quite a while now. Then in 2015, Harper asked me to come on board with her as the head winemaker at her own winery, Peony Estates. She even offered me a stake in the business, and I jumped at that opportunity. It was an exciting endeavor, no doubt, but we did have a few problems along the way.
You mentioned problems. What kind of problems did you experience?
Well, unfortunately, Peony Estates is located near a swamp. Now, that was just the best that Harper could afford at the time with what she'd saved up to buy her winery. The proximity meant that pests were a concern for the facility, so basically, if there was a pest out there that would eat a grape, you could be sure that we would have them in groves.
So how did you go about handling these problems with the winery?
Originally, we used an organic solution to try to contain any pest issues, but sticking to those organic solutions, it wasn't just costly, it was ineffective. So in October of 2015, we switched over to a chemical pesticide for our building foundation and for our vines. And then we started using chemical solutions instead of the organic inside the facilities in about mid-2018.
So did you ever have any disagreements about Peony Estates and the way to handle these problems?
Well, Harper is who initiated the switch to chemical pesticides for our vines and the foundations. As far as spraying the foundations, I had no concern. There was no disagreement. But using the chemical solutions directly on our vines absolutely did not sit right with me. Not only would we lose our chance to market Peony Estates as an organic establishment, the landscape, it just wasn't designed for it.
What do you mean by the landscape wasn't designed for it?
Now, Peony Estate sits on a long slope. We have grapes planted all the way up and all the way down the hill. We didn't really worry about this when we first started planting at the winery because we only used an organic solution at the time. But after the switch, I couldn't help but worry that if we sprayed the vines directly with the chemicals, too much of it would wash down from the top and collect at the base, making all the grapes grown at the bottom possibly contaminated.
So how did you guys try and work around this?
Well, Harper absolutely would not budge on her plan to spray with chemicals. So I just did the best that I could. I started training our employees on the proper use and the storage of our pesticides and personally did everything that I could to make sure things were handled properly. Unfortunately, Harper later forbade training from continuing. She said that it was taking time out of work and it would just cost us money in the long run. I also saw to it that grapes at the bottom of the slope that could have been contaminated were roped off and never mixed in with our production.
How often were those grapes thrown out?
The grapes that I roped off were thrown out at every harvest. However, in 2018, I was out of town away from the winery. I did remind Harper that those grapes needed to be thrown out, but I truly can't speak as to whether or not she did.
Okay, and Miss Lewis, are you aware of the investigation on Peony Estates?
Yes, I am.
And what are your thoughts on what was found during the investigation?
Well, I know that there was a contaminated bottle of wine found in the dumpster. A few days before the wedding, we had sprayed everything just as a precaution. There was a little bit left over, and we threw it away in the dumpster. If you ask me, that's obviously how the bottle got contaminated.
Thank you, Miss Lewis. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Plaintiffs, you may begin with your cross-examination of this witness.
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to say that my name is Shelby Johnson once again. Ms. Lewis, you met the defendant while working for Danny Francasio's winery, right?
Oh, yes, we did. Harper was also an employee, and we hit it off immediately before she even asked me to come on board at Peony Estates.
So you and the defendant became close friends?
Yes, we had an instant friendship. I mean, we were kind of like a friendship that was just meant to be, you know?
In 2015, the defendant asked you to be the head winemaker of her new winery.
Yes, and I also got offered a stake in the business. It was an outstanding opportunity for me as far as business ventures in the wine industry go.
And as head winemaker, you worked closely with the defendant, didn't you?
Well, I did work closely with Harper, but we were on different sides of the business operation. I was dealing mostly with the grapes and the bottling, everything that had to do with the physical production of the wine. But Harper, she was more in charge of the marketing and financial business type side of things. She was rarely crossing over between the two.
But you did have to work with her, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Your Honor, asked and answered.
Please move on with your questioning, counsel.
Your Honor. You'd agree that being on good terms with your co-owner is important to running a business.
Well, it would really be unfortunate to have to work in an environment where we hated each other, so yes, I'd agree.
So remaining in good standings with the defendant is important to you?
I'd like to maintain my friendships. It'd be unfortunate to see it crumble at this point.
Maintaining that relationship with the defendant is critical to making your winery thrive.
I would say that it's a helpful aspect. Of course, it's possible to function at opposite ends of each other. If we didn't like each other, we could certainly make the business work, but it does help to not be hating each other's guts the whole time.
You would call the defendant your friend, correct?
Multiple times, of course.
The defendant spoke to you about Genesis Petrillo?
I've heard some things, yes, about the relationship between Genesis and Casey.
The defendant repeatedly told you that she hated Mr. Petrillo.
Yes, it's fairly common knowledge that Harper was not Genesis's #1 fan.
She expressed to you that she wanted Petrillo to disappear?
I believe there were some statements along that line, yes.
And you thought that such a statement was harsh, didn't you?
It is a little harsh to be saying such things about your future son-in-law.
Miss Lewis, you never witnessed the defendant interact with Mr. Petrillo, though, did you?
No, I don't believe that I did.
So you can't testify about the way the defendant acted towards Mr. Petrillo?
No, I can't testify if she was different in person to him or not.
Miss Lewis, you skipped the rehearsal dinner, right?
Yes, I was not present for the night of June 7th.
So you were not at Peony Estates the night that Mr. Petrillo was harmed?
No, I was not at the rehearsal dinner on June 7th.
But Miss Lewis, you're in charge of managing the pest issues at Peony Estates, am I right?
Yes, that is part of my job.
So you agree that Peony Estates has pesticides on hand?
Of course, we live next to a swamp. If we didn't have pesticides on hand, the pests would be out of control. It'd be impossible to make wine there.
And the defendant is aware of where these pesticides are held, isn't she?
Yes.
The defendant has access to Peony Estates' pesticides?
She's the owner. She has access to anything she'd like, yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Will there be any redirect of this witness?
No, Your Honor, there will not be a redirect. I just ask that the witness stand down or step down.
All right, Ms. Lewis, you are excused. Defense, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Harper Martini to the stand. It's good to see you, Ms. Martini. Could you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Harper Martini.
What is it that you do, Ms. Martini?
I run Peony Estates, which is not only a winery, but also a bed and breakfast.
How long have you owned the winery and bed and breakfast?
I've owned Peony Estates for 5 whole years now. It's so crazy.
Do you have a lot of experience making wine?
I do. While I was in college at Midlands University, I started my wine work at Cumberland Farm. Later down the line, I worked at Rosie and Pedro, and now I own my own business. You could say I'm a wine enthusiast. The more wine I drink, the more enthusiastic I get.
Do you have any children, Miss Martini?
Yes, the light of my life and only daughter, Casey.
Could you tell me a little bit about
Excuse me just for one moment. I'm hearing a an annoying high-pitched sound. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but if it only started just now with this witness, so I assume it's either Mr. Lawless or
Yes,
Ms.
Your Honor.
Buchanan. Is there anything you can do about that?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe it's my computer fan. I'll try to mute myself when my witness is responding in order to mitigate any noise that might be transferring there.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lawless. Whatever we can do to mitigate that would be appreciated. You can continue.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Martini, could you tell me about Casey?
I love Casey with all my heart. She's all that has kept me going these last few years. She's so smart and caring. She always has cool ideas for the winery. She's the one who said we should add a bed and breakfast. I thought that was so awesome. I even dreamed that one day Casey would take over the winery.
Have there been any recent major events involving Casey?
Well, Casey was supposed to get married to Genesis Petrillo.
Have you ever interacted with Genesis Petrillo before?
I have. Casey first introduced us in 2015, and the first thing he said to me was, "Rapid River Valley isn't hip enough for this artsy fartsy Peony Estates." I always try and be a positive and loving person, but this has rubbed me the wrong way. Casey brought Genesis home frequently after that.
Would you consider that there was ever any conflict between the two of you?
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really like Genesis very much. He would say really snide things to me, and I just couldn't help but say something back most of the time.
Were you comfortable with the wedding moving forward?
Well, I wasn't the biggest fan of the wedding going forward, but I wanted Casey to be happy, and if that's what was gonna make her happy, then that's what I was gonna do. You know what they say, a happy child makes a parent smile.
Were you ever at peace with Genesis?
Not exactly. Genesis continued to be snide and rude to me, and I continued to be combative too. The worst is when he left that horrible voicemail.
Would you recognize that voicemail?
Oh my goodness. I could never forget it.
Your Honor, permission to show Exhibit 8 to the screen. Exhibit 8 has been pre-admitted per stipulation.
All right, you may put Exhibit 8 up on the screen.
Miss Martini, is this the voicemail that you were referring to?
Yes.
Does it look like it's been changed or altered in any way?
Not to my knowledge, no.
What did Genesis sound like on the phone when they sent you this?
Genesis sounded completely wasted. I could practically smell the alcohol on his breath over the phone. He said all these things about them moving to France and me never seeing Casey or my grandchildren after the wedding.
How did you feel when Genesis said these things to you?
I was absolutely heartbroken. Genesis was threatening to whisk the only person I've truly loved out of my life since my husband died, Casey.
Did you believe those statements to be?
Well, I didn't have any reason not to believe them. I don't think Casey would try and stay away from me forever, but with Genesis, who knows? He was such a bad influence on her.
Did you do anything about it?
Yes, I wrote a note. I needed to test Genesis.
You wanted to test Genesis? Could you tell me what that means?
Yeah, I needed to make sure that Genesis truly loved Casey.
And you wanted to make sure Casey's best interests were in mind?
Absolutely. That's all I've ever wanted. I want Casey to be as happy and fulfilled in life as possible.
Your Honor, permission to now show Exhibit 24. Exhibit 24 was admitted into evidence by the plaintiff during their case in chief.
Yes, counsel, you may put Exhibit 24 up on the screen.
Ms. Martini, is this the note that you wrote?
Yes, it is.
And why did you write this note again?
I wrote it to test Genesis to make sure that he truly loved my Casey, my daughter.
Looking at this note, it has $300,000 in there. Can you tell me what that means?
The money was to make sure that he didn't value material things over my daughter. If he took the money and ran, then good. He was out of our lives and we can just get over this whole thing. And if he didn't take the money, then I felt he would be right for Casey. And then I could begin to make peace with Genesis if I felt he was in the marriage for the right reason.
Were you trying to threaten Genesis with this note?
No, I was truly just trying to make sure that he had Casey's best interests in mind.
What did you see Genesis do after giving him this note?
Well, he took the money, but he threw away the note. I didn't exactly expect him to just take the money and marry Casey as well.
Did you ever try to make up with Genesis in another way?
I did. I gave him our newest bottle of wine, Kara.
Why would you give Genesis a bottle of wine?
Well, this was a particularly special bottle of wine. In 2018, we had this incredible year with our Petit Verdot grapes. So I created a blend with the Petit Verdot, Merlot, and Malbec. The thing that made it was so special is that Casey had named the bottle herself, Kara. Isn't it absolutely beautiful? By giving Genesis the wine, I felt like I was giving him a piece of my heart and bearing the hatchet just as Casey had asked. You should have seen the crowd after I'd gifted the wine. Even the cake was in tears.
Did you ever believe that there was anything in the wine?
I mean, the only thing I ever believed to be in the wine was the Petit Verdot, Merlot, and Malbec grapes that I mentioned earlier.
Did you ever believe the wine was contaminated in any way?
Oh, goodness, no.
Did you try and kill Genesis, Miss Martini?
Absolutely not. I didn't like Genesis, but I would never wish the pain of losing a significant other on my daughter. I've experienced that, and it's just so hard. I wouldn't want that for my Casey.
If you knew the wine was contaminated, would you have prevented Genesis from drinking it?
Oh, absolutely. If I had known that wine was contaminated, I would have gotten out of that dining room as fast as I could. Any decent human being would.
Did you know about the consequences of organophosphate poisoning?
I did.
Where have you heard about that before?
Well, one time, my employee Kirby Doolittle, he accidentally drank a glass of wine or like a sip of wine, honestly, that had been exposed to pesticide. I yelled at him to stop, but he didn't, and he got so sick. So now after that, like, I try and be as careful as possible with wine and making sure that it's as safe as possible.
And what happened when you first saw that Kirby Doolittle was about to drink the wine?
I tried to stop him. I really tried to stop Kirby as best as I could, but he drank a sip and then he was sick almost to the point of death.
And would you have done the same thing for Genesis Petrillo?
Absolutely. I couldn't bear to let my Casey feel the pain of losing a significant other.
Thank you, Ms. Martini. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Does the plaintiff have a cross-examination for Ms. Martini?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Martini. I want to first talk to you about your relationship with your child, Casey Soto, and her partner, Genesis Petrillo. You'd say overall you had a very good relationship with Casey.
Of course, I did spend lots of time with Casey over the years. So I didn't really have another parent with me, so we got as close as we could.
However, you thought that Miss Soto's only flaw was their relationship with Petrillo?
Yes.
In fact, you wish that Miss Soto and Genesis Petrillo never met.
Yes, I do wish that they had never met.
You hated Petrillo so much that you wanted him out of your life for good?
I did want him out of our lives.
This was partly because you were scared that Miss Soto would not take over your winery in the future if she was with Genesis Petrillo, right?
I mean, this is true, but I thought Casey might come around one day, but if she didn't, that's her wishes, and that's okay.
And when your concerns were aired about Petrillo to your daughter, she just brushed them aside, right?
I mean, she did, but I guess that speaks to her true love of Genesis.
But still, she brushed them aside.
She did.
So despite this, against your own wishes, Casey Soto was planning on marrying Genesis Petrillo.
Yes.
And she even said she didn't want you at her wedding?
I think so. I think she might have said that at some point, but we were all just heated. I don't think she truly meant that.
So the night of the rehearsal dinner, you were fearful that Genesis Petrillo was going to steal Casey and run off to France.
I was fearful, but honestly, knowing my Casey, I felt like she would encourage Genesis to come back eventually and at least visit me.
You wished you could cancel the wedding and make Petrillo disappear from the face of the earth?
I mean, I did wish to cancel the wedding, but again, it made Casey happy, and I obviously wanted Genesis out of our lives, but again, it made Casey happy. So I was just, even though it's not my needs in the situation that needed to be looked at, it was.
But you still wish, right, that Petrillo would disappear from the face of the earth?
I mean, yes.
So on the morning of the rehearsal dinner, you were already angry that Genesis Petrillo had arrived late?
I mean, I was angry. Imagine arriving to your own rehearsal dinner late. That's pretty unprofessional.
And at that moment, you wanted nothing more than for Petrillo to be gone.
I did, but he was there and we were going to move on.
During the rehearsal dinner, you led a toast?
I did lead a toast.
You gave Petrillo the Cara wine that you were saving for them.
Yes.
But you gave everyone else in the wedding party the Horizon wine?
I did. I gave the Cara wine because I wanted it to be especially special for Genesis because it was named by my Casey. Plus, I wanted him to be the first to sample this wine.
Later at 2:30, you got a panicked phone call from an employee about someone being rushed to the hospital, correct?
Yes.
And you immediately assumed the call was about Genesis Petrillo?
I did. I thought he was in some bathroom throwing up with alcohol poisoning again.
And right after you got this news, you went to Petrillo's room.
I did.
And they weren't there?
No, they weren't.
You then found the empty bottle of Cara wine you gifted to Petrillo laying on the floor, correct?
Yes.
And then you ripped off the label from the bottle?
Yes, I ripped off the label because you can't recycle the bottle and the label together. The label's actually biodegradable. So I was going to go put that in a separate. I did rip it off, yes, but I was going to go recycle it, yes.
And then you dumped the bottle in the trash?
I did throw the bottle in the trash, yes.
This bottle later ended up testing positive for organophosphate pesticide?
It did, but there were canisters of pesticide in the trash can as well. I really wish I hadn't done this because then, we wouldn't even be in this situation.
And it's the same type of pesticide in Peony Estates.
I mean, yes.
And as owner of Peony Estates, you had complete access to all this pesticide.
I mean, of course I did.
So in late 2018, one of your employees, Kirby Doolittle, he got extremely ill from drinking pesticide-laced wine, correct?
Yes. Oh my goodness. One sip of that wine and he was so ill.
So based on this prior experience, you know that if someone drank contaminated wine, they wouldn't know because it's clear.
Yes.
And it has no smell?
Yes.
Yet you still kept the bottle of Cara wine right next to an empty can of pesticide, right?
I'm so forgetful sometimes, honestly. I really meant to move it.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the night some more. You found
Objection, Your Honor, sidebar.
Counsel, I'm going to instruct you to please refrain from making sidebar comments.
When you found out that Petrillo was in the hospital, you didn't inform your child, Casey Soto.
No, honestly, Genesis usually bounces back from these alcohol poisoning things pretty quickly, so I had assumed he would be back from the wedding.
And you felt relieved, even happy, that Genesis Petrillo was finally out of you and Miss Soto's lives?
Yes.
Now I want to talk to you about Exhibit 24, your note to Genesis Petrillo from 2019.
Yes.
You would recognize this exhibit if shown in court today?
Yes.
As Exhibit 24 has already been entered into evidence, Ms. Pruitt, can you please get Exhibit 24 on the screen? Ms. Martini, or Ms. Martini, this is a copy of the note you made to Genesis Petrillo from 2019, correct?
Yes.
Your relationship with Petrillo got so bad, you even tried paying $300,000 for them to leave?
It was a test. I was trying to make sure that he was right for my Casey. If he took the money and left, then you know what? He left. He was out of our lives. But if he stayed, then I knew that he didn't just have material things in mind. He was truly in love with my daughter.
But you said if they don't leave, you would take Genesis Petrillo out of the picture the hard way.
I did say that. I was being a little dramatic. I was a little upset when I wrote this note. I'm such a drama queen sometimes, honestly.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Redirect, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. Lawless, you may begin your redirect of this witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Miss Martini, what was your relationship with Casey Soto like?
I mean, we were really close. She was my daughter, so we were as close as two peas in a pod, honestly.
And would you have Casey's best interest in mind over everything else?
Oh, of course, always. I love her so much, and seeing her hurt through this whole situation has been so painful.
Would you ever want her to be in pain after losing her loved one?
Absolutely not. When that happened to me, when I lost my husband, I was so devastated. I was crying every day. I wouldn't wish that pain on my daughter.
Now, plaintiff just asked you a question about the toast. What was the toast like for you?
For me, it was a moment of change for me. I was really going to try my hardest to put aside my differences with Genesis. And I tried to give a best as toast as I could. And it made me so happy because I saw Casey put up a little heart with her hands after I gave the bottle to Genesis. She seemed truly moved.
Did it look like there was anything preventing anyone at the table from drinking the wine?
No, anyone could have had a glass if they had wanted.
Objection, Your Honor. This is outside the scope of my cross.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes, you may, Mr. Lawless.
Yes, Your Honor. I believe plaintiff opened the door. They mentioned the toast as well as who was there at the time. I'm simply just clarifying the entire scenario. That way the jury has a full picture of what was actually going on in that situation.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Well, Your Honor, all I simply mentioned in the cross was that one set of bottles was given to the guests and one set of bottles was given to Genesis Petrillo. That's not about, none of my questions were about who can drink the bottle or anything like that.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think this is within the scope of Mr. Cathari's direct examination, or cross-examination rather.
Yes. Ms. Martini, do you need me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
Do you believe there was anything preventing anyone at the table from drinking that Cara wine?
No, I don't see any reason why anyone wouldn't be able to drink from that bottle.
Now, you mentioned on your cross that there was a potential for contamination on a dumpster. Is that right?
Yes, this dumpster full of pesticide is the same dumpster I threw the wine bottle.
Why do you think it might be contaminated there?
I mean, the
Objection, Your Honor, this
pesticide.
calls for speculation.
Do you have a response, Mr. Lawless?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness was aware of the scenario in terms of what was disposed in the trash can, as well as the proclivity of pesticides to contaminate any specific product. They've run into it in the past. They understand how it might be contaminated, what might contaminate, as well as the availability of contaminants to enter into a bottle, etc. I'm simply asking them about their knowledge of, given that the pesticide and the bottle were in the same trash can, if there was any possibility for contamination. It's well within their knowledge, Your Honor.
May I respond, Your Honor?
I'm going to sustain the objection, so I don't think a response is necessary. You can proceed, Mr. Lawless.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Martini, going back to the questions on the plaintiff, You were asked along the lines of whether or not you had bad blood or any overarching spite with Genesis Petrillo. Did you resolve these?
I was trying to resolve them. I was trying my best to bury the hatchet, as Casey had asked, and that started with the wine bottle. I really wanted to make sure that Genesis and I were on good terms.
And if Casey wanted to move forward with the wedding with Genesis Petrillo, would you truly would have stopped them?
You know, I had made a bunch of empty threats, but honestly, no, because it was what my daughter wanted. That's what I was going to give her. Is she was going to have the wedding that she wanted.
Thank you, Ms. Martini. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any recross from the plaintiff?
None, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Martini, you may step down and you are excused.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense rests its case in chief. We ask for a brief 5 to 10 minute recess before closing arguments.
All right, counsel, we will take a 5-minute recess. I have the time at 12:27. So if we could all reconvene at 12:32, the court stands in recess.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Is everyone here for, who needs to be here for closing argument?
The defense is present, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. We will now hear closing arguments from the parties, and everyone should please switch back to speaker view. You'll find that option in the top right-hand screen. Plaintiffs, you can begin.
May it please the court. Miss Martini did what she said she would. Members of the jury, your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest, most memorable day of your entire life. Unfortunately, for Genesis Petrillo, Casey Soto, and all their family and friends, that day never materialized. All thanks to the vile actions of the defendant, Miss Harper Martini. Members of the jury, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this trial, it's that Miss Martini did what she said she would. Ultimately, the relationship between the defendant, Miss Harper Martini, and Mr. Genesis Petrillo was one of pure hatred. That is why we are here today in the case of Petrillo v. Martini, where the plaintiff, the states of Genesis Petrillo, accuses the defendant, Miss Harper Martini, of battery in the death of her child's future spouse, Genesis Petrillo. Now, as a plaintiff, we hold the burden of proof in today's case. We must prove, based on the preponderance of evidence, that Miss Martini committed battery against Genesis Petrillo. Now, Your Honor, this does not mean that you have to be 100% convinced that Miss Martini should be held liable. As long as you think it's more likely than not that Miss Martini actually committed all of these actions, then you will be holding her liable for what she just did. Throughout the entirety of this trial, we have proved all three elements necessary to hold her liable. We've proved that Miss Martini committed the act, Miss Martini intended to cause harm, and finally, we proved that Genesis Petrillo died as a direct and proximate cause of Miss Martini's actions. Let's go through each of these points one by one. Let's go over to the first thing. Miss Martini committed the act. The defenses try to come up here and give you their own broken picture of the events. But let me tell you what really happened. As we've heard from their testimony of Austin Lewis, their own witness, he stated that as owner of Peony Estates, Miss Martini had access to all the pesticides she ever could need in the world, giving her the perfect front to kill Genesis Petrillo. And in the weeks leading up to the wedding, this was on everyone's minds. As we heard again from their own
Mr. Cathari, I'm getting some lag on my end.
Could you repeat that?
I was getting some lag. Your image froze and I couldn't hear you for a minute there. So if you could repeat the last few statements you just made. I can see you now and I can hear you.
Can you hear me right now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'll repeat like a little bit from before.
All right, sounds good.
Let's start with Miss Martini. Let's start with Miss Martini committing the act. The defenses try to come up here and giving you their own broken picture of the events at hand. But let me tell you what really happened. As we've heard from their own witness, Austin Lewis, as owner of Peony Estates, Miss Harper Martini would have access to all the pesticides she ever could need or want in the world, giving her the perfect front and avenue to kill Genesis Petrillo. We then heard from their witness, Danny Francasio, and he admitted in cross-examination that he was fearful that Miss Martini would use the pesticides to kill someone on the day of the wedding. And ultimately, that event occurred. Because as we heard from the testimony of Lonnie Paris, the investigative journalist, the bottle of Cara wine was found right next to an empty can of pesticides laced with high levels of isofenbos. This same bottle of wine was given to Genesis Petrillo, who ended up dying a mere few hours later. Later in the night, when Genesis Petrillo was in the hospital, Harper Martini marched up to Genesis Petrillo's room, found the empty bottle of Cara wine on the floor, ripped off its label, and dumped it in the trash. The defendant likes to claim she was simply recycling the bottle. But why would she recycle the label and not the bottle? It doesn't add up. Based on the preponderance of evidence, which is more likely than not, there's simply too many factors here. There's too many factors linking Harper Martini to the bottle, to the pesticides, to Genesis Petrillo, showing that Miss Martini indeed is the one who did it. Let's go now over to intent. It's no secret that Miss Martini and Genesis Petrillo had a deep, vile hatred of one another. Because it's not like Miss Martini just threatened to kill Genesis Petrillo once. She threatened to kill him dozens and dozens of times over the course of the wedding. As we've heard from Casey Soto, the defendant's own child, that Harper Martini hated Genesis Petrillo so much, she said, "Leave or I'll put you 6 feet under." Miss Martini was scared. She was scared that Genesis Petrillo was going to take Casey Soto, run off to France, and Casey would no longer be able to run her pride and joy, the winery, Peony Estates. That's why she said, "Leave or I'll take you out the hard way." Ultimately, their relationship got so bad that Harper Martini then was willing to pay $300,000 to make Genesis Petrillo disappear, saying, "Take the money or you'll go out the hard way." Just a few weeks later, Genesis Petrillo was dead. The defense likes to paint this relationship as one of mere dislike. But would you really pay $300,000 to someone to disappear if you simply dislike them? I think not. And moreover, based off Harper Martini's past experiences, it just gives further motive to this. As we've heard through Miss Martini's testimony, she had prior experience with the use of pesticides when her employee Kirby Doolittle got sick after drinking it. Through this experience, she knew that this pesticide had no smell, no color, no taste, and was extremely dangerous. Yet, she still kept an empty can of pesticides next to the bottle of wine that she gave to Genesis Petrillo. And once again, based on the preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than not, based on those past death threats, and based on Miss Martini's past experiences with the pesticides, everything is pointing to Miss Martini knowing what she was doing. Finally, let's examine the direct and proximate cause. Now, I'd like to point out here that the defense has not provided an expert witness. So based on the preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than not, we're going to be listening to Dr. Kwan here. And what Dr. Kwan said here is very important. First off, she noted that Genesis Petrillo's blood alcohol content at the time of death was 0.16, which is way too low for it to be the sole cause. What she said after that was even more important. The pesticide, the same pesticide that was found in the wine bottle, was found in Genesis Petrillo's stomach. Moreover, this pesticide was found only in the wine and not in the food or any other contents, making the wine the direct and proximate cause of Genesis Petrillo's death. Members of the jury, I want you to remember that Miss Martini did what she said she would. The defense is going to come up now and try and muddle the story with their own broken picture of events. But don't buy any of that, because I will then come before you, refute all of their arguments, and ask that you find Miss Martini liable of battery based on the preponderance of evidence, because she did what she said she would. Thank you.
All right, defense, you may proceed with your closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor. Members of the jury, opposing counsel, Your Honor, may it please the court. Today, we are here to decide a case of battery. And as a result, I want you as the jury to understand the facts very clearly, because we have heard quite a bit in today's trial. So I want to break everything down and I want to condense it so that we understand each individual fact we're deciding today and exactly what you as the jury need to consider when you go back into that deliberation room. So let's understand what the charge is first of all. The charge is battery. And now the plaintiff has a burden here. The plaintiff must prove by a preponderance of the evidence. That means that we as the defense do not need to show you anything. You must be fully convinced by preponderance of the evidence under every single element that the plaintiff has satisfied this specific burden of proof. And that might beg you the question, what exactly do they need to prove? Now, there are 5 specific things that they need to go over. And I'll give credit to the plaintiff. They covered the exact ideas pretty well, but in response to how they justified those arguments, their arguments fell flat. Let's examine each individual element and understand exactly what the facts were presented in today's round. The first is they need to show that Martini intentionally mixed pesticides into the wine. Now, you've heard quite a bit of testimony today by Austin Lewis, by Harper Martini, that the wine bottle that was tested was found in a dumpster. And this dumpster also happened to contain the exact same pesticides. No one had tested the bottle before it came into contact with those pesticides in the dumpster. And therefore, there's reasonable cause to assume that the contamination occurred at that point in time. Even when you heard from Dr. Kwan mentioned that the stomach contents did not just contain wine. It contained other aspects of food and material, meaning there is no direct proof that it was in fact the wine, as anything could have mixed into the stomach and caused a positive result whenever you test the stomach contents. Therefore, when we look at whether or not Martini intentionally mixed pesticides into the wine, it's simply not true. And I want to address another aspect of what the plaintiff just told you. They told you that Martini had access to pesticides and therefore she committed this heinous act. But I want to be very clear with you. Access does not equal cause. I might have kitchen knives in my kitchen, but that does not mean I'm simply going to go out and use them in order to harm another individual. You have to keep that in the back of your mind. The simple fact that something is accessible does not mean that those items are going to be used for a crime. So let's look at the second element. Martini acted with intent that Genesis would ingest the pesticides and be poisoned. You can see here that Martini never made an admission of, I am going to poison you with pesticides. That way Genesis will die. And why might you not hear something along the lines of that? Because Martini made no inference of wanting to kill Genesis with pesticides. Now, when you look at the exact situations of that event as well, Martini gave a bottle at the table to Genesis Petrillo, of which you heard multiple glasses were poured and those glasses were passed around. If that was the case, why would Martini want to compromise everyone sitting there at that table? The simple fact is she didn't. She did not have any intent in order to kill another human being. The third fact was that they must prove that Genesis drank the wine and ingested the pesticide, just as Martini intended. But again, we heard that there was a chance for this pesticide to be contaminated with the wine bottle in any other situation. For instance, the dumpster, for instance, the other food. Those all lead to probable cause, lead to something that is an alternate explanation, lead to something that might not be what the plaintiff is asserting. And therefore, they have not proven this by preponderance of the evidence. The fourth point is that Genesis died as a result of ingesting the pesticide. Now, we're not contending this specific fact. It's well established that Genesis died as a result of ingesting pesticide. But you do need to understand the intent behind it. Harper Martini made no statement whatsoever in order to try and kill Genesis as a result of drinking that pesticide specifically. And lastly, the fifth element. They must prove by preponderance of the evidence that as a direct and proximate result of the foregoing, plaintiff suffered harm. They have not shown this. They have not shown that by all of these facts that were presented in court today, that they were shown by preponderance of the evidence. They did not show that Martini was 100% intentionally mixing their pesticides into the wine. They did not show it by 50%. They did not show it by preponderance of the evidence. And that's the key thing in trial today. They must show by preponderance of the evidence that all of this was intentional. Because if it was an accident, it's not battery. If it was not intentional, it's not battery. And therefore, when you go back into that deliberation room, looking at all of these specific elements that they need to prove, you can only see one conclusive fact. That being, when you look at preponderance of the evidence, you must find Harper Martini not liable. Thank you.
All right. Could we get the slides down? Thank you. We're now going to submit our ballots, the judges. I would just ask that everyone stay on until that process is complete. Hopefully it won't take more than, yes, sir.
I believe the plaintiff does have a rebuttal in this scenario.
Plaintiff, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you can proceed with your rebuttal closing.
Members of the jury, the defense likes to come up here and say mistakes are not battery. But the only mistake you'll be making today is if you find Harper Martini not liable for the battery that she caused to Genesis Petrillo. Let's talk about the facts that they just brought up in their close. First, let's talk about intent. They say that this pesticides was mixed in the dumpster with the wine, but that ignores Dr. Kwan's analysis. Through Dr. Kwan's expert opinion, we saw that this pesticide was found in the wine, which was found in Genesis Petrillo's stomach. Moreover, this pesticide wasn't mixed in with any food or any substances, meaning that the wine was a direct and proximate cause. They even admit this in closing arguments once more near the end, showing that they can agree themselves over what caused Genesis Petrillo's death. Then let's talk about their intent once more. They say that Harper Martini didn't mean to cause Genesis Petrillo's death. The fact of the matter is, that's simply not true. As I said before you countless times, Harper Martini did what she said she would. She said, given death threats thousands of times throughout the entirety of the wedding. Moreover, through her experience with Kirby Doolittle, she knew that pesticides were harmless, they were impossible to trace, impossible to smell, and were extremely dangerous. Yet she still kept it next to the bottle of Cara wine anyways. Members of the jury, we are here today to find out what truly happened, and we owe it to both the victim and to the accused to find Miss Harper Martini liable for the battery we caused. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. I apologize for the mistake regarding rebuttal. Usually how it works is that plaintiffs have to reserve time for rebuttal, but I understand the rules do not require that for the purposes of this tournament. So I think that was the cause of my confusion. Now the judges have to submit their ballots, and I would ask that everyone stay on until that process is complete. Hopefully it won't take very long, but I will come back on and we will, the judges will provide some feedback to you all. I just want to say everyone did a good job under the circumstances. It's a little awkward using Zoom for something like this, but you all took it in stride. So now we're gonna get off camera and finish completing our ballots, and I will let you all know when we're ready to give you all some feedback. All right, we just got confirmation that the ballots are in. I'm going to ask that the scoring judges get us started with some feedback for the advocates. No particular order, just whoever jumps on first.
Hey, all. I guess I'll go first. Do we know if there's like a time limit on this? I think it's supposed to be quite short. Does anyone know?
I believe it's 10 minutes for everything combined.
Okay, cool. So I'll be quick here. So just some general comments to start off with. I think y'all did a really good job overall, every representative and witness. I will say almost across the board, particularly I might have noticed it with witnesses, but something that I kind of felt across the board was that many parts of speech seemed somewhat scripted. I recognize I actually had to ask the the coordinator for this competition whether scripts were a thing, like whether y'all were going to be reading off of scripts or instructed by them, because sometimes I was genuinely wondering that. That might be an issue of preparation. I was told that witnesses were given an affidavit, but that you could kind of answer questions and stuff however you saw fit. I think that might be a practice issue, but it might also be an inflection kind of thing, kind of intonation so that things don't seem rehearsed, but rather seem somewhat more natural. So my judging reflected that, which I preferred. As far as certain advocates, I can't necessarily address everybody, but I will say, again, a more general comment. With examination, both direct and cross-examination, some of y'all did really excellently with tailoring the questions to kind of not be argumentative in nature, but to really lean into the argument that you're going to be making or that your co-counsel would be making. I noticed that particularly with Mr. Lawless for the defense. I noticed that with Mr. Kothari. I believe I noticed that with Ms. Pruitt in particular. So that's a really good thing. I think that's a really great advocacy skill. Be sure that when you ask questions, that you really make the use of the time that you have. There was 1 or 2 times where questioning was a little bit cut off a bit prematurely. And questioning can be a really great tool to build on for further arguments. And so since y'all get a recess period, presumably to work on arguments, that can be really helpful. So definitely take advantage of it. But let's see, overall, I think y'all did really great. This is a really good mock trial round. I think it was a really good case for both sides. Oh, and one final point. I recognize that this is obviously a legal arena. Be careful with the phrasing that you use for certain things. I believe in one of the opening arguments, somebody mentioned innocent until proven guilty. This is a civil case, not a criminal one. That's a criminal sort of reference. So that's a nitpicky thing. But when you're making legal arguments, just make sure that they're going to be on point. Mr. Lawless, at your closing argument, particularly towards the end, you mentioned a lot about sort of the burden of proof, preponderance of the evidence, that sort of thing. I thought that was a really compelling argument and very well done. But yeah, I think overall y'all did great. So congratulations.
Yeah, I echo a lot of that. And I just have a lot of comments that I'm going to go through pretty quickly. But if you have specific questions, feel free to stop me. I'm not going to go over the things that you did well because I think you know that you did them well. I'm going to go over things that I think you can fix for the next round because obviously that's going to be what's more helpful. So the first thing I was going to mention is like just kind of read the room. Your judge was very specific about formality. And I think that in a Zoom courtroom, that's actually very helpful because you can ask the judge when to start. So you're not like kind of guessing whether it's time for you to start. I think just being careful to make sure that once you figure that out about your judge, like to maintain that, especially like one example is like he mentioned at the beginning, he did not want you having sidebar kind of conversations with the witness. I think that happened just throughout the entire trial. So just be aware of that and adjust. I think another thing is just playing better to your character. I think in a couple instances, like I get that you're trying to have a character and, you know, have something like unique about you to, sorry, one sec. Sorry, the baby's crying in the background. To have something unique. And I think that sometimes it just takes away from your credibility. So like, for example, the defendant, you just seemed a little too enthusiastic about, you know, your work. And I think you have to realize like it's a very serious thing that you're being accused of. Another thing is like the doctor, like you don't have any stakes here. Like you don't have to argue back and forth again and again. Like you're here just to present the facts. Like what happens at the end of the day doesn't matter to you because you're getting paid regardless. And I think just a couple other things, of course, let people finish talking. I think it happened with witnesses and people over talking over the judge, so just be aware of that. Another thing that was maybe bothered me is I think a lot of times like you use the last name of the witness or the first name of the witness without like an article. So you would just say like Martini, and it's like, well, it's your client. So like when you're talking to your client, you wouldn't be like Martini, be like Miss Martini, right? Like it's just to keep it respectful. And I think genders kind of got flipped around, which I know is hard to keep track of. And then the last thing I guess I wanted to say, let me double check. Oh yeah, the objection. So there was a couple times when speculation objections were made or objections that the judge sustained, right? And then the opposing counsel would ask the same question again, just slightly rephrased, and you guys would let it pass. And I think just be aware, like you can't object again. And I think it shows that you're listening if you object again, because the same issue is still there. It's just phrased slightly differently. And I think so generally you guys did a great job. I just think kind of realizing like one, like your characters need to reflect the seriousness of the person you're playing, and just be aware that like small stylistic things make a bigger impact on your judging than I think you realize. So like one last thing before I forget, your witnesses, don't fight so much. Like there was a lot of fighting that was going on, and it was like a lot of you don't have a stake at what happens in this case. Like realistically speaking, like whether Harper Martini is liable or not, it doesn't matter to you. And the fact that you fight back and forth really takes away from your credibility and makes you seem biased. So that's the only other thing I would add. But great job again, guys.
Oh, and if we just have a minute, I'd just like to kind of jump in there. I did write this down, but I forgot about it, so I appreciate you bringing it up. That I really like the point Ms. Aziz made about kind of like the tone. This is a really serious case, though it's civil and not criminal. You know, we're basically talking about somebody poisoning somebody else with the intent of killing them, with or without the intent of killing them. So particularly for witnesses, you know, this, I mean, obviously you're not going to get on here dramatic crying and stuff, but it's a little funky to kind of be laughing or you know, kind of have this exuberance. It doesn't bother me inherently, but when you're being accused of effectively killing somebody, you know, that might not be the right tone to make. Similarly, if you, I think Miss Medina, you were the witness. You know, your fiance may or may not have been killed. You know, you should really. I think you did a great job, but I think that's something that you should really, you know, take on. And, you know, you'd be upset about that, right? If your actual mother killed your actual fiance by poisoning, you know, that's something that you would feel strongly emotive about. So maybe just take that tone for everybody, just take that tone into more consideration, because I do agree that impacts judging a lot more than y'all might realize.
Yeah, I would just echo a lot of the feedback that the other judges provided. And just I want to repeat globally, this was a very unusual year to conduct this tournament. This has been an unusual year for many reasons, but you know, I think you all did a great job under the circumstances, advocates and witnesses and judges. And I'm happy that we were able to do this as well as we have. I do feel that some aspects of mock trial are lost through Zoom. There are some human aspects to it. There's some interactive aspects to it. But you know, it is what it is. And I would just to go back to the prior comment of speaking over witnesses and over the judge. I also understand that that's sometimes difficult. You know, sometimes we have some lag in the audio or whatnot. And so I think, you know, that may explain some of those instances where that happened, but in general, you don't want to do that. And I would repeat the comment about, innocent until proven guilty does not apply in this case. This is a civil case. Make sure that you have the law down. I think there were some times where, maybe the response to an objection wasn't very convincing. But overall, everyone did a great job. And I certainly enjoyed myself this time. And I hope you all continue on your trial advocacy journey. All right. Does anyone have anything they want to add? All right. I think that wraps us up, and you all can log off now. I'm going to end the meeting soon.
Thank you guys for judging.
Thank you. It was really nice to see you. Good luck.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Great job.